The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised.
Bumblefoot. Bumblefoot.
Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys. They let us think that we're big boys. They let us make a lot of noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Oh, the deeper I fall.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello, Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat above all. There will be a perfect pickup. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and lift off.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. It's great to have you along for the ride. on this Thursday, June 15th, Friday, June 16th. If you're on the East Coast or across the pond, hope you had a great day and night. We are live right here in the Great White North on top of the mountains of central British Columbia as we are here 7 days a week. We welcome everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are also live on the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We're live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station funded by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Horns up if you love our music from our resident guitar god, Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. Bumblefoot is the official sound of SOR. Now, if you're a social media junkie like I am, give me a follow on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download our shows from iTunes. We're also on RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, Player.fm, and Stitcher. And, of course, our website is SpacedOutRadio.com. And if you head over to Patreon.com for as low as $1 a month, you can become a patron of SOR as well. Now, if you want to take part in this show, you got to do me a favor. You got to sign into one of our chat rooms, either by going to our website and clicking Listen Live, go on Revolution Radio, on Spreaker, the UPRN chat room, or you could join up on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club. Or if you're on Twitter, use the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. I will get to your questions and comments in there as well. Now, if you head to our website, for just $5 a month, you can become a member of the SOR Space Travelers Club. And you can also pick up a t-shirt from our Spaced Out Radio store. You can grab a poster. I'm going to autograph that for you. And a SOR sticker or two. Or if you're looking for a weekend getaway, September 29th to October 1st, we have the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon right here at 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia at the beautiful Spruce Hills Spa and Resort. Tickets right now are on sale at our store for 10% off until July 31st, so make sure you cash in on those quickly. We also have a great news section called The Encounter Online, put together by our editors, Eric Markham and Everett Thiemer. You can check out my latest blog there as well. And if you've had an experience you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report so we can check it out for you. For many of us out there, we are in the age of conspiracy. Say nothing to anyone. Keep to yourself. Keep a low profile, with the exception if you're spilling your guts out on social media. The age of conspiracy has led people to stop watching the news, reading the papers, voting, or chatting with their neighbors. Ah, what a suspicious society we have become. Remember when life was much simpler? Kids actually playing outside? We don't know what our elected officials actually do these days, do we? Weren't they supposed to just work for us? We don't know what secrets our government keeps for the sake of booming military-industrial complex. We don't know who to turn to anymore. And if we quote Bumblefoot, we don't know who to pray to anymore either. Jamie Sexton from Rebel Planet News is back for his monthly feature, Talking All Things Alternative. Jamie is about uncovering the truth about what's truly going on in our world beyond the white picket fences and Monday Night Football, or up here, Hockey Night in Canada. His job is to report the findings of what's going on. Why are events happening like Jade Helm? What are the secrets of Area 51? False flags? Are they real? Or are they just plants by government officials? Jamie Sexton, it's been a month, my friend. How are you?
Doing good. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing very good. Very good. How's your monkey doing?
He's doing good. You might be able to hear him in the background squeaking. He's here with me, so if you hear any squeaking, that's him.
Oh,
and squeaking.
We hear the squeaking, my friend. We hear the squeaking. That's okay. What's he playing with? You got a toy going on there? Or?
Yeah, he's got a new chain he likes to play with, and then he has some his food I roll up into little balls, so he thinks it's a toy until he eats it.
Now, I heard a rumor that you actually used to have a tiger or something.
Yes, that's correct.
What's with all the wild game?
I don't know. I think my mother once said, she said, I don't think you'd have a pet that couldn't kill you. So there may be something to that. I've had snakes and wildcats and monkeys and scorpions and all kinds of things.
How the hell do you have a pet tiger? That's what I want to know. Like, where do you keep him? He's obviously not sleeping on your bed at night.
That's an interesting thing. I didn't really consider that when I first got him. I just kind of was, overtaken by the idea of the opportunity to get him and brought him home. At that time, he was the size of probably a large house cat, only his paws were huge. And I brought him home, and I lived in an apartment at the time, and somebody brought it to my attention. So what are you going to do when he grows? And I was like, what you did daily. So he ended up being 750 pounds.
Holy cow.
By the time he was full grown.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Do you still have him?
No, he's in Texas with other tigers. He's got 14 tiger girlfriends from what I understand, but had to let him go and rehome him when I moved to California, and then ended up in Vegas.
Gotcha. Well, you know what? That's an interesting pet none the least, my friend. And that's what I love about having you on. There's always something new that's happening. Now, how's things going with Rebel Planet News right now? I know later on this year you're going to be launching, and I think it's going to be an amazing site. That's why we started this feature with you a couple of months ago.
Absolutely.
So do you want to give our fans an update?
Yeah, we're going, everything's moving ahead. A lot of technical things to work out whenever you build a site like that. There's a whole lot of data to be processed. Also trying to be careful about how we're going to go, how we're going to approach staffing and circulating the articles and things like that. So there's still a lot being worked out in the final stages here, but getting closer for sure. I'm excited about it.
You know what? It is a very exciting time for people who have maybe never heard your portion of this show, Jamie, because we always have new listeners popping in. Why start up Rebel Planet News?
Well, I've been following alternative media and alternative information sources and news sources for most of my adult life. And the internet, with the explosion of the internet, I realized at some point how powerful alternative information and information sources are, and how limiting the corporate media and what we call the mainstream media is in delivering full-bodied information to us. So I was inspired by all of the research that I was able to do and all the information that I was able to glean by researching the internet and alternative sources. And I think it's a great vehicle for that. And I think that the more people that can get in the game with that, the better. And I think there's always room for improvement. There's always a way to restructure and improve the methods by which alternative media is delivered so that it's more reliable or perceived, not that it's not necessarily reliable, but I think we need platforms that are recognized, alternative platforms that are recognized as reliable. And so I wanted to be a part of that.
Now, for someone who has been involved in the Hollywood scene, in the music scene in California and Nevada, which is really starting to take off in Nevada the past number of years, how did you start getting your information? How did people just start coming up to you, Jamie, and telling you things that probably the normal person just doesn't know?
Well, I guess my interest in things outside the fray, outside the normal margins of everyday information started a long time ago. Probably when I just turned 50 this year, so it's probably when I was 21 years old is when I first started exploring that type of thing. And there wasn't an internet then, at least, publicly. So my interest in that is goes way back, and I've always engaged in discussions about the goings on in the world, geopolitics, politics you don't necessarily hear on mainstream news or on C-SPAN, and things happen where it doesn't matter what the setting is, whether it be in Hollywood or music scene or just everyday work around the water cooler. Discussions will pop up, and like minds tend to flock together, and one thing leads to another, and next thing you know, you got a whole group of people that kind of exchange information, kind of like you do.
Absolutely, and you know what? I don't know if you're like me, but I can tell you this. I really feel that when I look in and have those private conversations with people, some of it doesn't even make it on the air because you do have to have that non-disclosure type commitment to the sources, to the people you talk to. Do you find that those conversations are the most important rather than what you broadcast or publicize publicly?
Well, I think they're the most important to validate something that you would like to represent. If you're getting information from, say, a politician about something that's forthcoming or is in the works, or from somebody in the military, or any source, and it's a reliable source, yeah, there is that element of wanting to protect your source, but there's also the element of feeling confident that it's at a certain stage of development before you even share it. You can really put yourself out on the limb if you say, so-and-so said this, and then 6 months later it turns out that the course has changed, or it turns out not to be true, et cetera, et cetera. But I always value resources, and over the years have kind of accumulated a pretty healthy reservoir of sources that I can lean on and check with and bounce things off of. They hardly ever let me down.
Do you find that as you are growing, you're meeting more people, you're meeting more of that information that you were seeking? Or do you find that it's the same people kind of rotating the same stories? Because here in the paranormal field or the conspiracy field, Jamie, it seems like there's a lot of people out there who just rehash the same old stories. A lot of them do not have a lot of proof to what they are saying. Coming to mind, I think of Pizzagate. I think of other topics, the Queen being a reptilian who feeds on virgin children for lunch, and that's why she doesn't die. There's a lot of crap out there. So it's one of those things where I'm just wondering if you feel that what you are doing already has a little bit of a black eye because of the market that has been created.
Well, we're not necessarily, Rebel Planet News and myself, I don't necessarily want to go too far out on the fringes. Like I said, if it's something that I don't feel confident in, it's not really anything I want to write about. Might be something I may want to explore or read about, look more into, but I'm not going to represent information or hopefully perpetuate information that's baseless. So, I find that, the more you get into this, the more people want to come to you and share things with you. I think you have to learn over time, whether you're listening to an individual or a news source or reading something on the internet or anything, any source of information, you kind of got to train yourself to be discriminate. And kind of develop a sort of instinct for the reliability of that information.
Do you feel that there is enough information out there right now that is truthful? However, the juicy story always seems to make the headlines. The juicy story seems to rub the tinfoil hat wearing crowd, which slightly I'm a part of, because of my alien experiences, but it seems to make the tinfoil hat wearing crowd just a little bit more rambunctious in believing what they hear in fake news rather than believing what is reality.
I don't know. I don't know if necessarily they're enticed. I mean, sure, I guess certain people have certain triggers and interest points or whatever. I think if you're manipulating your readers and viewers or whoever you're conveying your message to believe something that's untrue in the first place, that's kind of a dishonest medium. But and sort of omitting things and then adding things for the sake of sensationalism certainly isn't honest journalism or a good source of information. I think no matter what environment you're in, whether it be the internet or in person or in a town hall meeting or any setting whatsoever, you're going to have a mixture of different types of people in the audience always. And certain things are going to, grab their interest, and other things they'll be turned off by. I think that just has a lot to do with the individual. There is a lot of misinformation out there, and more often than not, my problem with that is that it kind of waters down what we should be concerned about. In other words, if there is something there that we should pay attention to, that information can be overshadowed by an extra element that's added, that makes it seem hokey, or people throwing in possibilities as fact or conjecture as fact, and then people who might otherwise be objective to listening to something or be interested in something might then be turned off by that information and maybe the whole topic altogether, because it's been tainted with some element that's just too far out there. That's my concern.
It is difficult indeed, Jamie, to try and figure out in this medium what is real and what is fake, especially as a lot of so-called researchers out there are pulling away from the experiencer. And that's why on our end with this show, what we've done is we've actually pulled the reins in, and we've basically said to our audience, you make the decision on what the person is saying. That's your choice, whether or not you want to believe them. So when we have that experiencer on here who may have suffered from MK Ultra experiences or alien experiences, Bigfoot, paranormal, doesn't matter what it is, our job is to get that story out, because it's the experience to us what matters. Do you think we are overlooking the personal experiences that people are having in order to really solve what is going on? Or are we too hell-bent right now on trying to find insiders to give us any tidbit of information on what it looks like on the inside?
I don't know. I don't. I'm the sit on your mind, and I think that information is great. When it comes to things like paranormal and extraterrestrial things that are sort of featured on your show, those are things that to me are very personal. Not every person encounters those sorts of things, and someone like myself, I come from the school of thought of, if someone asks me, do I believe in something, for example, well, until I've experienced something that unusual, I have a very hard time believing it until I've experienced something that far out there, because that is pretty far out there, a lot of these experiences. On the other hand, I think that what's wrong with offering those people a platform? Like you said, let them tell their story, and then, encourage the audience to use their own discriminate mind. It's a little bit different from what I'm doing. I'm basically trying to offer news, where I may be part from the mainstream field in that is that with Rebel Planet News, what I would like to do is spend more time talking about things that the mainstream news doesn't want to talk about, what they won't address, and they just flat refuse to do it. And some of these things that people think are conspiracy theories are actual conspiracies, and they need some light on them. So in addition to reporting everyday news and factual-based news that you can find on any network, which we will be doing, we're going to tackle some stories that other news agencies have been reluctant to do and get to the bottom of it, hopefully. That's our objective with that. But yeah, even with your show and the topics you cover, I encourage that sort of thing. At the very least, at the end of the day, we get to talk about things that are on our mind, right? And we get to put them out there and share stories. As long as people listen to information with an objective mind and use their own common sense and reasoning, more power to them. Put it out there.
So in your opinion, then, how can the public tell what is real and what is fake?
Well, you never can tell with absolute certainty if you're taking someone else's word for something, whether it be, in conversation or in print or in television. That's just part of life. You can't necessarily take everything some source says as gospel. You just can't do that. Not only are there, people and sources out there that are purposely deceptive, but there's also mistakes. People make mistakes. And a lot of information, most information, in fact, that you get, say, from like a news source is at least third-party information. Very rarely do people get if you're watching, like, say, for example, a reporter, a talking head on your favorite news channel, very rarely did that talking head actually sit down in a chair across from the players in the story. Occasionally they do. They'll do one-on-one interviews, etc. But most of the time they're reporting what their field agents have gone out and explored. And the field agent may have gotten third-party information. And then that information makes it back to the news desk. And at the news desk, then the editor gets a hold of it. And then the producer gets a hold of it. So, and you know how that works with the corporate game and political bias and trimming stories and omitting this and omitting that. So, but that, such is life. That's just the way it is. So, my big thing is training yourself to have a good instinct about what it is that's about the story that's relevant to your life, how it may affect you, consider those things, and also kind of learn a little bit about the process. If information and knowledge and news interest you, then learn a little bit about how to discriminate, use your life experiences, validate stories. If someone tells you something and 6 months later it turns out to be true, maybe it's a good source. If 6 months later it turns out not to be true, consider that. So you have to train yourself as a listener and not always look for the source to be necessarily the most honest entity of information, because sometimes they'll let you down.
Well, let's start off tonight by talking about one of my favorite subjects, and we touched on it just last night with UFOseekers.com, Tim Doyle, who has joined our Spaced Out Radio team. And we were talking about Area 51 and what is hiding out there. And Tim has some great videos on his YouTube channel about getting up close and personal with the camo dudes, and the camo dudes actually calling the police on Tim and his girlfriend Tracy, so that way they were camping in a public area, but obviously the camo dudes didn't like it, and they kind of called the cops on them. So it's very interesting on what is happening out there. Now, you have visited the outskirts of Area 51 where the public is allowed. What is that like when you make that left at the black mailbox?
Well, I'll tell you what, it makes for a good field trip, if nothing else. And you definitely want to go at night, but I've done it a few times now. And there is no more mailbox, from what I understand. I think the mailbox has now been removed.
They just replaced it. They just replaced it.
Is it back? Good, okay. Well, once you make that left out into the desert there, it's about a 14-mile drive to the back gate. Well, actually, it's not even the back gate. It's the back perimeter, which you're not allowed to cross. And there are signs there that say do not cross beyond this point, et cetera, et cetera. The actual gate, I believe, is another 23 miles down the road from that. But if you make it to that perimeter where the signs are and the camo dudes are, they definitely will come over that hill. I've enticed them to come over the hill 2 or 3 times now. And not to be a menace, but they're aware that you're there before you ever turn off that main road there by the mailbox. They know you're there. And if you go in the daytime and you look to your left or right in the desert, it looks like rocks and tumbleweeds. But if you're really careful to look, you can see what looks like rocks, but there's little antennas sticking off the top of them. So I'm assuming those are motion sensors and audio devices and everything else. We went out there, some friends and I went out there once, and it was way after midnight, pitch black out there. And I guess we'd pulled up to that perimeter, that gate where it says do not cross. We had already gone that far, and and the camo guys came over the hills and, turned their lights on, and we knew they were there and they knew we were there. And so we said, you know what, let's back off about 300 yards and just kind of camp out over here, off the dirt road and watch the stars and see if we can see anything interesting. Because, presumably at that point, you're not really breaking any laws. You're just within the proximity of Area 51. So we're sitting out there in the dark, pitch black, and I whispered to my buddy, at this point, we're probably 300 yards from the perimeter that says "do not cross," and then the camo dudes were up on a hill in two or three different Jeeps, and their lights were off, and but we could see like the silhouette, and they were probably another 200 yards at least up that hill. So we're talking 500 or 600 yards away from the camo dudes. And I literally whispered to my buddy, I said, you think they can hear us? And both sets of headlights on both Jeeps lit up and flashed us, just basically to say, yeah, we hear you.
Oh my God, that had to be a little nerve-wracking at that point.
Yeah, that was a little. Well, we got a chuckle at it. We're like, wow, I don't know what they're using, but that's pretty amazing. And then it got a little more creepy because one of the camo dudes, and I think I've been out there 3 times now. Yeah, and this was the last time that they did. I'm talking about, and they've never really messed with us, but this last time, one of the camo Jeeps actually did come over the hill and passed us real slow and then passed us back. And he did a couple of passes there in the desert. And then a previous time I was out there, no real incidences, but a helicopter flew over us. And literally, I mean, it's pitch black again. We had no idea that helicopter was there until it was right above us. I mean, you could not hear that helicopter coming at all. I don't know what kind of helicopter that is, but until it was literally right above our head, we couldn't hear it. And then once it was over our head, it sounded like a regular helicopter, but then it flew away and you couldn't hear it again. So very quiet.
That same helicopter is what Tim was telling us about last night, where he and his girlfriend were camping and they had their tent sent out, and right in the middle of the night, a few times, that same helicopter approached them, and they did not hear a thing until that helicopter was over. So it's weird coincidence that you mentioned that as well. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it kind of makes you wonder about the stealth helicopters that they were using when they took out Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, Pakistan, because they used stealth helicopters there that were pretty much silent as well.
Yeah, I mean, on a mission like that, you would have to, because otherwise, most of the time when you hear a helicopter, you hear it, quite a ways away. But yeah, this thing, I mean, it was dead of night. I mean, you could hear a cricket jump, and we did not hear that helicopter until it was right above us. It was pretty amazing.
Now, what do you think they are hiding out there? Do you think it's just secret military experimental craft or weapons, or do you think there's something a little bit more hidden there because of the stories we have heard, whether it's from Bob Lazar or other people who believe that aliens from Roswell to crashed ships are all hiding in this S4 underground bunker? What do you think is there?
I really don't know. I know. I mean, what we do know for sure is that the base exists. That it was hidden for the longest time. They denied it existed, and then of course it came out that it did exist. And then and we do know for a fact that it was used, and some of the other lake beds surrounding that were used for bomb testing. As early as 30s, 40s, and 50s, they were testing nuclear bombs out there. And then and we also know that they've developed and tested aircraft out there, like the Blackbird and the Stealth Bomber and other things. So we know that much goes on. So it's a secret base. Beyond that, I've always been interested in that myself. I've always been curious to know what's going on out there. I've never, Bob Lazar is an interesting cat. He's very interesting. I've watched his stuff, and he has some interesting information, as do others. But I don't know. I've never been able to reach that tipping point in my own research, to find out if there's anything beyond just military development out there. But I keep an open mind about it. I'll tell you one thing, they got it so guarded out there that if there was anything otherworldly, that'd be a great place to hide it, that's for sure.
So what do you think then, Jamie, in your own speculation, that people are seeing in the skies at night? Because there's aircraft and orbs flying around all over that area, and there's not a sound to be had. And let's face it, a jet engine is pretty loud, even on an F-117.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I've never seen anything out there. I have seen some aircraft out there that I didn't hear, but I didn't see anything that looked so unusual that I would say, well, that's not an airplane or a drone or a helicopter. Drones are pretty quiet. And so I haven't had any personal experiences. As far as I've never been able to see any footage that anybody's gotten out of there that was all that interesting. I've seen other footage from other places that was pretty cool. But Area 51, I've never seen anything that was like, oh, wow. Nothing that I couldn't necessarily attribute to, military aircraft or experimental aircraft. I don't know. Maybe other people do. I'm not aware of it personally.
Have you ever met anybody who works there? You live in the middle of the desert in Las Vegas. There's a lot of people who live in Las Vegas who work at Area 51, the Janet jets flying in and out of McCarran International Airport on a daily basis, 24/7. Have you ever met anybody who has said they worked out there, and were you able to prove that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've met a few people who work out there. Didn't really talk much about what they do out there. I don't think they're going to tell me other than to say, well, we do some developmental work. They're not really going to, just openly give you that information. They're not supposed to. But I have been curious. In fact, I shared a story with you once about following when I first moved to Las Vegas 12 years ago. I actually I was so curious about it. I wasn't even aware that the Janet terminal that's out here existed. Once I found that out, it piqued my curiosity. So I wanted to see more of that, and I had a few experiences regarding that terminal, the Janet terminal.
You have to give us one of them, because the one story I absolutely love is where you were following someone.
Yeah. This is a few years after I realized that terminal actually existed, and I don't know who dubbed that terminal. It's an airport terminal in Las Vegas here. For the viewers, if they don't know, the listeners, our international airport here is McCarran Airport in Las Vegas, and around the peripheral of the airport, like most major airports, there's a lot of smaller terminals for delivery type air cargo, and all sorts of other aircraft share that airport, and they have their own terminals there. And one of the terminals is very unmarked. There's no sign on it. There's no address on it. There's no markings of any kind. In fact, even their airplanes don't have markings. They do have THAL markings now, but for decades they had no THAL markings. In other words, no THAL number whatsoever. But they do now. It's a very small black number. But for years they didn't even have that. They're white airplanes, and they have a red stripe down each side of the airplane, and very nondescript. The terminal, the airplanes, the whole bit. And if you didn't know what it was, you just think, it's just some small airline there. And I don't know who dubbed the name Janet Airlines, but from what I understand, that stands for just another non-existent terminal. Is that what it is? Janet, yeah.
I've heard that too.
Yeah, I'm sure that's not an actual name for it, but it's kind of been dubbed that. But anyway, those are the planes that shuttle the workers who live in Las Vegas to Area 51 and the other bases in the desert daily, and then bring them back home when their shift is over. And from what I understand, they have dormitories out there. So some people stay out there a lot longer than others. But some make the trip daily, and some stay longer out there. But when I found all that out, like I said earlier, my curiosity was piqued. So I had to have a look at this thing, and it took me a couple of years to build up the nerve to do this. But I wanted to find out more. So. There was a guy that I saw him get off the plane, and he walked inside the terminal for probably a good 10 minutes, and then he came out, and I knew it was the same guy, heavy set guy wearing suspenders, and easy to identify as the same guy I saw getting off the plane. And he got to his truck and got in his truck, and there's an apartment complex across the field and across the road where you can see the people coming and going out of there. And so when he got in his truck and left, I followed him. I had no idea why I was following him per se. I thought maybe if he stopped somewhere, I might, catch him having some coffee or a drink or something, strike up a conversation. I don't know, but you know, it was just curiosity, and I followed the guy. It was creepy, but I followed the guy probably a good 20 minutes, and he lived out in Henderson, and I followed him all the way to what I'm presuming was his home, and he parked his truck in the driveway, and I just kept driving past on his street. And by the time I got to the cul-de-sac, which was only a few hundred yards away, and turned around, I was just going to leave at that point. I'm certainly not going to knock on somebody's door or bother them. So I was just going to turn around and leave. And when I made that turnaround in the cul-de-sac and my vehicle was headed the other way on the street, there was a Homeland Security truck there. And they followed me for a good while. They wanted to know what I was doing. So I guess it's protocol for them if they're being followed, if they recognize they're being followed, to call Homeland Security or whatever their sources are.
Did you get pulled over?
Yeah, they pulled me over probably a few streets over before I hit the main strip there, and they flashed their lights at me. They had some blue lights in the grill. They kind of flashed me over, and they asked me what my business was and what I was doing. I said, nothing, I'm lost. And they accepted that. They didn't really grill me or anything beyond that. They just said, what are you doing what are you doing in the area? What's your business over here? And I said, it was a residential neighborhood, so you know, I didn't confront the guy or bother the guy. So at that point I hadn't really broken any laws as far as I'm aware, but they wanted to know what I was doing. I said, oh, I'm lost. And they said, all right, be on your way. And that was it. I went on my way.
That had to be a strange experience in order to go through, because you have to wonder if they had the technology when you're at Area 51 to hear you whispering to your buddy. You have to wonder if the guy called in, or maybe there was some sort of security button on his vehicle. I know we're getting all, you know, tinfoil hat wearing, but that had to be very interesting that by the time you turned around, they were there.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it was a good at least 20-minute drive from the terminal to where this guy lived. I don't know. I always assumed he made a call from his vehicle and said, I think I'm being followed. You know, I don't know. I know that when I first found out about that terminal a few years earlier, when I first moved to Vegas, I drove out there. I drove on that street there and did a couple of passes, and there were 3 blue government vehicles. They looked like Air Force vehicles, but they didn't say Air Force. They were just dark blue vehicles with government plates on them. And they didn't bother me. They didn't harass me, stop me, or anything like that. But they weren't there when I turned on that street. And 5 minutes later, before I exited that street, they were posted up, kind of keeping an eye on me. But you know, that Janet terminal sits literally 300 yards away from the Las Vegas Strip. And there are thousands and thousands of people daily that go by there. So I'm sure they're used to their share of looky-loos and interested parties and snoops like myself. So
what happens if you go up to the gates there?
I did go up to the gate once with a buddy. We went up to the gate. We were going to pretend like we were lost. And so we went up to the gate there, and the guy said, where's your badge? And we didn't have a badge, obviously. He said, can I see your badge? And we didn't have it. He said, we're looking for it. And before we could get anything else out of our mouth, he said, you need to turn around right here. And made sure that we turned around and exited. So they're not going to tell you anything about what goes on there. I mean, again, it is a military base, and those are the people that work there. I would presume that most of those people that fly from the Janet terminal from Vegas to Area 51 and the other bases in the desert, I would assume that most of those are civilian contractors. And engineers and those types of things. I don't think they're necessarily, the majority of them at least probably aren't military. But still, it's a military base, and I'm sure they protect their interests. So.
And you know what? I fully agree with you. I remember a couple of times. The first time I went to Vegas in a long time was 2012, and our flight actually got delayed by a Janet jet. I didn't know up until that point that the Janet jets actually have full command of the airport, where if they got to take off one of their flights, all other flights are delayed until the Janet jet takes off. Did you know that?
No, I had no idea that.
Yeah.
Huh.
We were 5 deep on the runway trying to get home, and we were delayed like 15, 20 minutes because of the Janet jet that had to leave first.
That's interesting. So how did you find that information out, that was your delay?
I ended up looking it up when I got home. Because, well, I was sitting on the window seat, and I saw the Janet jet, or all of us were stopped going up to the runway. And yeah. I saw the Janet jet out the window taxiing towards the runway, and then there was no flights taking off, and then the Janet jet took off, and then all of a sudden, after it got to its altitude, then we were able to actually move forward in the lineup, because I could see when the plane took off. I could see it bank. I could see it start heading north, because me being the buff that I am when it comes to aircraft and what they're doing, I was watching to see as far as I could see until it disappeared.
Right.
Yeah.
I've watched their flight patterns before, and they'll fly pretty much due west out of Vegas, and then they'll take that hard right up north to the base. I mean, it's pretty clear what they're doing. But yeah, so you think that their flights may take precedence over all the other commercial flights there?
If you watch it, absolutely. And then when I saw you in Vegas at DJ Ashba's party, DJ Ashba from 6 a.m. and formerly of Guns N' Roses, when I met you at that party in 2016. When we landed at McCarran, I actually saw a new jet that I hadn't seen parked there. It was a green stripe, but it was a 747. And I thought, wow, they're really moving on up to going to the Boeing 747 from the 737 that the Janet jets usually are. I was surprised by that.
Well, I that's interesting. I don't know if that was one of theirs or some other contractor involved. But their fleet, I used to pay attention. I don't really pay attention anymore. But their fleet used to have 2 major shifts. I think it was like 6 airplanes that would leave early in the morning and come back a few hours later, and then that same fleet would leave and come back again. So I don't know if there was two main shifts out there, or if the planes were just dropping off and coming back and then going back for their daily pickup like a school bus does. I have no idea, but I used to kind of try to, just as a hobby, pay attention to when those flight patterns were, but I long since quit doing that. But they're still there. Saw them the other day. So
we still have about 2.5 minutes before we go to break. I believe you have another Janet story about you and your ex-wife driving around.
Well, no, that was the one with the blue vehicles. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize on that then. I thought you had more, but I guess I was wrong. So you say you've met people who have worked at Area 51, and they are silent at what they do. Obviously, they sign a contract that basically tells them to shut the F up. Do you think that, or are you surprised that there are no other people who've actually come out since Bob Lazar?
Let me put it this way: if there was something otherworldly out there, then yes, I am surprised. If it's just military stuff, I'm not that surprised. because, you know, military people and military contractors, even private ones, tend not to talk too much about what goes on with their work. On the other hand, if there's something really otherworldly going on out there, I would be surprised, because that's the kind of thing that you'd think somebody would talk about. So I've always waited for somebody else to come out with a smoking gun, but just nothing so far.
But usually when there's a whistleblower who comes out on something, there's always the copycats or the people who want that same 15 minutes of fame or whatever it is. And yet with Area 51, we just never got it. We never got it. And Bob Lazar, love him or hate him, believe him or not, his story is so far out there. Do you think it maybe scared people a little bit?
In what way?
Of coming out. Because they literally erased his entire identity. And you know what, Jamie? I'm going to let you think about that, because we are literally about 45 seconds away from our break. And we'll pick that answer up right after this. Jamie Sexton is our guest tonight. He's from the up-and-coming Rebel Planet News, launching later this year. It is going to be one of the top alternative news media online stations. I highly suggest that you check it out when we launch. Jamie comes on this show the third Thursday of every month as we discuss absolutely everything from conspiracy to fake news to the real stories behind things like Jade Helm and the Queen eating virgins for dinner, so that way she can stay alive, because, as we know, not many people stay alive at 88 years old. Anyways, please notice the facetiousness in my voice. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be right back with hour number 2 with Jamie Sexton from Rebel Planet News right after this. Coming September 29th to October 1st, the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon. Hi, this is Dave Scott. The event will be held at the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Come join us for an amazing weekend of speakers talking all things paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, aliens, Sasquatch, intuitiveness. Listen to great speakers like Miriam Delicato, Samantha Mowat, and the crypto guru Ronald Murphy. Get your VIP passes by going to spacedoutradio.com and clicking on the Paracon banner. Come to BC, where the paranormal is waiting for you.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Had a run-in with ghosts, maybe Bigfoot, or seen lights in the sky? Hi, I'm Mike Schmidt from the SOR Sightlines. I'm here to investigate your sighting. Head to spacedoutradio.com and fill out a report on the Sightlines. All your information is 100% confidential, and I will help you figure out what you've been seeing. File your report and let's find out the answers together.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest. From Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Oh, there's only one way to rock. Loud and proud. In high definition. Radio 702 rocks. Las Vegas.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness, you can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up. Enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, author Robert Collins is going to join us. We're going to talk everything from UFOs to paranormal and everything in between. It's going to be a great show indeed, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. Thank you so much for tuning us in on your nighttime shift, or maybe you're studying at college. We are also live on the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Great to have you with us there as well. We're live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. It's Theology. It's Theology is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect with us live during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. Find me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download this show and others on iTunes. We're also on RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, Player.fm, and Stitcher. Our website is SpacedOutRadio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Be like Teresa. Change your profile picture to the Spaced Out Radio t-shirt. You look good, Teresa. Thank you for doing that. She got a t-shirt. We sell posters. I'll autograph them. We got stickers as well. And, of course, if you're looking for a weekend getaway, how about September 29th to October 1st, the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon, held in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia, at the beautiful Spruce Hills Spa and Resort. Tickets are on sale in our store right now. VIP tickets for 10% off for the entire weekend. You're going to get a lot of openings and areas to hang out with that. We hope you check it out. We'd love to have you up here in British Columbia. Tonight, we are talking with Jamie Sexton. He comes on the third Thursday of every month with Rebel Planet News, his budding online news outlet that will be launching later this year. Jamie, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here.
Right before the break, we were talking about Area 51 and just being surprised that nobody besides Bob Lazar has come out since then to say what is actually going on. Are you surprised by this? I mean, we've heard everything, all sorts of stories from people who are there being drugged so that way they don't remember what they're doing, to stories of, threats against their family and to have the government basically take everything away from them that they've worked hard for if they go public with anything. Why do you think so many people keep quiet, and yet Bob Lazar is still the only one to ever come out with any sort of information of what's at Area 51?
I don't know. That's a great question. Either there's nothing there to talk about beyond military stuff, or, like you said, maybe they're scared. I don't know. It'd be nice if something was going on there to get some good, juicy information, though. Something we could, I remember, who was it, Bill Clinton, that when he was elected, said if there was anything going on there, he'd like to know about it, and then we never heard anything. So he never followed up.
Well, it wasn't until President Obama actually said Area 51 publicly in one of his addresses that was the first time a president had ever recognized the facility.
No, that's not true. I've heard that too recently, but that's actually not true. There was a lawsuit against Area 51 that brought the Area 51 to the public, and that's I believe Clinton actually addressed something about it at that point. But that's people like to say, that it was all in the Obama administration, but actually it was mentioned before that. It just kind of, and then I remember Google Earth came out, and somebody, it wasn't a president, but some other politician said, well, you can see it on Google Earth, because people were still denying it. But when Google Earth came out, people were like, well, you can see it on Google Earth. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. So that's the first thing I did, was go log on and have a look for myself.
BTO has a question for you. Jamie, have you ever had any personal MyLab experiences? I know you haven't had any extraterrestrial experiences, but have you ever had anything strange happen to you that you can't explain?
No, nothing. You mean like what, to do with extraterrestrials or?
Well, MyLab is where they say the government comes in and they take you and they do some pretty nasty stuff to you.
No, not at all. No, that would ruin my day. So far, so good.
Well, you got to feel good about that at least.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears here for a second. Okay, I want to talk about false flags here, because one of the things that I don't like about the conspiratorial field is the fact that the minute something happens around the world now over the last 10, 15 years, automatically there is a group of people that start yelling, false flag, that's fake, that's government suppression, that's a government act in order to throw more bombs in Syria or Afghanistan, or to rage the public in believing that the military war machine has to keep going. What is your thoughts on false flags?
Well, I'll share that with you. First, I'd like to respond to the way that you phrased that. I think that phenomenon that you just explained there is sort of just the nature of the beast, isn't it, that we're dealing with now with things like the internet and the sharing of information. I mean, you know, if you think about it in different terms, think about like a sports event. You know, if somebody's favorite team is playing another person's favorite team in the Super Bowl, and they're all at a Super Bowl party, and, you know, with every call that the ref makes, there's gonna be an argument. Oh, that wasn't right. That was a foul. You know what I mean? It's gonna be. You have that kind of thing going on. I think that's just human nature to be that way. So I don't necessarily think that I think it's something that we're going to have to learn to get used to. It's just a human dynamic. It's going to happen that way. Anything that happens, people are going to question it. And in that sense, I think it's a good thing. I think a lot of people are scared of information. They're scared of information being wrong. And I think that the burden ultimately falls on the viewer and the listener and the reader to like I said earlier, to do their research, to check multiple sources, and to be diligent about and discriminating against what they're listening to or the information they're receiving. I think the onus ultimately falls on them to do their own research. Now, I'm not obviously I would never take the responsibility away from someone who, you know, holds themselves out to be a journalist or a news agency or something like that. Obviously, those people, and myself included, we have a responsibility to try to present true and accurate information as well. On the other hand, you know, we've been lied to in the past by the government. That's a known fact. We've been lied to by official and bureaucratic agencies. We know that for a fact. We've been lied to by the military. We know that for a fact. And we've been lied to by news agencies. We know that for a fact. Who was it? Brian Williams made up a story, embellished a story, got fired for it. We've had other broadcasters fired for that sort of thing. Hillary Clinton even embellished a story about her trip over in I believe it was Afghanistan. So people aren't always honest, the information givers. So, you know, you can't always say, you always have to keep an eye open for that sort of thing. As far as the false flag thing goes and everybody screaming false flag, I think it kind of plays into, I would rather people question things than just accept the official narrative. It's gotten, in my opinion, and it's one of the reasons that inspired me to do Rebel Planet News. In my opinion, the official news sources, I'm talking about the major mainstream news sources, radio, broadcast television, cable news networks, and from where I sit, they've earned a really negative and bad reputation with me because they get the story wrong too many times, and because they're so corporate and their message is just too every network is parodying the other network. And the only balance in that I see is a political balance. In other words, if one network tends to lean one way with a political bias and another one leans another way with another political bias, it makes it look as if you're getting both sides of the story, when in reality you might not be getting any of the real story. You may just be getting heavy bias on both sides. So I don't know. I'm not afraid of information, and I'm not afraid to take the risk of alternative information being wrong any more than I would mainstream information being wrong. And I would agree with you. I think that there is a tendency, a knee-jerk reaction by a lot of people anytime something happens to scream, "Oh, that's a false flag," or that's not real, or this or that. And I think that's just as irresponsible, especially when you do it in certain forums. In other words, if you are a news agency or hold yourself out to be a journalist or a source of information, and you do that sort of thing, I think you need to be more cautious about that. You need to, it's okay to explore the alternative, but you need to be more responsible. I don't worry about people in chat rooms or on social media and those kind of things, throwing those things out there. As far as I'm concerned, in this day and age, that's to be expected. And I would also say that the people who are in alternative media and those sorts of things, if they want to go down those rabbit holes and explore the alternative, more power to them. I would hold them responsible for the things they claim, but at the same time, I would rather somebody explore the alternative narrative than just accept what every news station is telling, because too many times they've gotten it wrong. So I think, in my opinion, that's a positive about the internet and alternative media. A lot of people see it as a negative, but I see it as a positive because we have other sources and other vehicles, perhaps, to get the real story out. And I guarantee you, if you find anything out about extraterrestrials, if we ever get that smoking gun, I know you want, I bet you it's going to come from alternative media.
You have no idea how bad I want that story, my friend. I'm still waiting for Carl the alien to show up on a unicorn at my house.
Well, I'll tell you what, if he does, you can have Carl, but I'm sure Tiffany has dibs on the unicorn.
I will send Tiffany the unicorn. Okay, right. I'll fly. I don't know if I can fly it, or maybe I got to put it in a horse trailer and drive that unicorn down for Tiffany. But I will get Tiffany the unicorn. How about that?
Perfect. Yeah, the unicorns, they don't have wings, right? That's a Pegasus.
No, that's right? The Pegasus. So yes, I will make sure that I get that unicorn down to Tiffany for sure.
Perfect. Well, if she's listening, I'm sure she's going to hold you to that. So
absolutely. You know what? I am sensing my psychic senses right now are sensing a major eye roll going on right now wherever she is in your house. Major eye roll going on right now. No, but on the flip side, I would love that story. I would absolutely love that story.
I bet you would, yeah. But like I said, you wouldn't get it from mainstream media. There's no way.
Not at all.
So that's I mean, we're out on a limb here, but that goes to my point that we've noticed in mainstream media there's a whole lot more pressure on them in the way they deliver the news. Their sponsorships and their corporate sponsors and are dwindling. Their viewership is dwindling, and more people are starting to get their news from alternative news sources, and I think that's a good thing, in my opinion. I really do. I think that's a good thing because when you only have 5 talking heads in the entire world to depend on for everything relevant in your world, that's a monopoly on information, and I don't feel good about that. I don't like that.
Well, one of the things that I could say, and I do have to say this, one of our resident psychics who listens to this show, Robert, down in Australia, he's pretty accurate with me. He's pretty accurate. And he actually says, don't worry, Dave, that story with Carl will be coming soon. But that's for another day. Carl better show up. I'm still pissed off that he hasn't come back. Now you're going to get me all riled up here. But on the flip side, here's a comment from a listener on Twitter, Mr. Skeptic, we call him. And I think this hits the nail right on the head. He says, I'm tired of people citing the fact that lies exist to cover up their own BS. Scared of information? No, it's just tired of the BS. And that's a pretty legitimate concern by someone who follows the alternative side, but also follows the mainstream. Because there is no middle ground anymore when it comes to false flags or comes to conspiracy theories. You're either fully against what has happened and believe the mainstream story, or you're so far to the other side that you don't even want to see what is real and what is not anymore. Because you're always siding against the government, against the story, if you know what I'm saying, Jamie.
Well, I think if you're slanted that heavily that you already have a predisposition that anything that comes out of mainstream is not legitimate, that's not a balanced place to be either. I would never encourage anybody to be in that realm. On the other hand, I think if you close your mind off and say, well, there's so much information out there, and I think that speaks to someone's own intelligence or lack thereof. If you say, well, I don't know who to believe, there's so much BS out there. Of course there's BS out there. There's always been BS out there. And there always will be. I mean, what are we going to do? Change humanity? You think nothing's going to change that. And the internet, it introduces a whole new set of, complexity to the whole dynamic of information. You on the one hand, you're free to speak anything you want. You can say anything you want. You can report anything you want. And I would say, hands down, without any hesitation, that's absolutely a good thing. And the minute anybody starts trying to regulate that or take that away or affect that, that's when we're in trouble. One of the most free things that we have right now is the internet. And I think that it's opened up a whole new realm of sharing information, and that's a good thing. And I would rather wade through the BS and learn to discriminate against, use my own common sense and decide for myself what filters to use, rather than someone start filtering things and censoring things. And I absolutely not. I would never go for that whatsoever. Not in a million years. I think that's one of the good things about the internet is that you can say what you want.
Do you believe then that the governments are using false flags against the people to drum up support for events like Syria, like the military-industrial complex?
Absolutely. There's examples throughout history of governments using propaganda to their benefit. That's a tactic that's been used since the dawn of humanity. Information is power. So, even before there was any technology whatsoever, false propaganda and false messages were passed, from one squadron to another, hoping that would be intercepted and throw the enemy off or affect their agenda in some way. It's a tactic. It's not an unusual event. It is a staple event. It's not something that's some wild conspiracy theory. It's part of tactical thinking. And, you know, if you don't know that, and you don't know much about history, that is a tactic that's used by governments and military and any other individual or agency that is trying to further something. You know, it's definitely an arrow in their quill, information. And if they can dictate information to manipulate, you know, if they can manipulate information and the message and the narrative to their benefit, they will certainly do that. And they have done that. Our government has done it. Probably every government around the world has done. I mean, just look at China. Have you ever watched, you know, Chinese television or you know, the way that they react to their leaders, or even North Korea? Take North Korea, for example. Those people only have access to a very limited amount of information, and they are extremely brainwashed because of it. So, yeah, absolutely. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that misinformation, propaganda campaigns, false flag campaigns, all sorts of disinformation and manipulation is used in the media. And if you don't think so, if you think that's a wild conspiracy theory, you're sadly misinformed.
I understand that there are times when the government is pulling the wool over our eyes, and I get that. But to go as far as to kill your own citizens, that seems a little bit far-fetched to me. Would you say that's beyond the government, or do you think that's something the government would sink low to?
I wouldn't put it past a government. No. We know that in history that sort of thing has been done. We know that, you know, in ancient times they've done that sort of thing. We've known in the medieval times that's been done. You know, yeah, I mean, I think people put way too much trust in the government, you know, and not realizing that the government, first of all, which government are we talking about? Are we talking about the U.S. government, the Canadian government, which government, or the government in general, or are we just using a general term? But yeah, I think that, you know, any body of government, first of all, is made up of human beings, and human beings are fallible and they're corruptible. And, you know, how many times have we seen around the world in our lifetime politicians going to jail for being discovered for corruption? Do you think, I mean, these people are not saints. They do bad things as individuals and collectively. And a lot of times these things are done through corporate means or through manipulation of funds, money. It's to, you know, they do it for financial gain. You know, who knows what all their motivations may be. But I never dismiss the possibility of corruption in government. I always find it amusing that people scoff at that sort of thing. You think the government? It's like, first of all, government is corrupt by nature, because most of everything they do is done behind closed doors. I mean, have you ever watched like American C-SPAN? Have you ever watched our government on C-SPAN? Just watch a few hours of that one day. What if you doubt that our government is capable of being corrupt? Just Google any Senate hearing, which we have in this country every day. There's always a Senate hearing for something that's going on. The bankers are corrupt. The politicians are corrupt. People on Wall Street are corrupt. There's corruption everywhere. So when people scoff at the idea of corruption, or that people can be fallible collectively or individually, or can't be scandalous, that's the most naive position that you could possibly take. And I think that that's when people really get in trouble, is when you trust your government too much. The government should never be trusted, in my opinion, ever. Even when they're doing the absolute right thing, you should always keep an eye on them, always. And we should demand that. We should demand more openness in our government, and we need to know what's going on. And that's one of the things that Americans, I think, that the rest of the world sort of doesn't understand about maybe America, but in particularly conservative America. I think they don't quite understand that. They don't understand the history of our republic and how we were formed and the principles that we were formed on and why those types of things are so important to some of us. Because I was considering this the other day, that most of the world kind of feels westernized. Your way of life in Canada really probably doesn't feel all that much different than what you perceive our life to be in day to day, right? In the U.S. and the same holds true for many parts of the world. So a lot of people think, well, it all seems the same. I don't understand what the problem is. And I think a lot of times what people miss and what's important about and unique about the United States is that it's the principles. You don't realize you have a problem sometimes until you have a problem. Sometimes you don't realize you have a freedom until you've lost that freedom. And so people like myself, we kind of hawk those things. We want to hawk what's going on. We want to watch. We want to keep an eye on our elected officials. We have a process that we elect officials here. And it's our job to keep an eye on them. It's not their job to keep an eye on us. And that's a value that we, the conservative Americans, hold dear. And the same holds true for our media, and the same holds true for our government. We want to watch things, and we should have open information, because too many times these people do end up in trouble. We find out years later, oh, they were on the take, they were on the dole, they were criminals. So I don't know. I personally sort of, in a way, take offense to people that don't have an objective eye and don't want to keep an eye on things. I mean, I understand the idea that you don't want to encourage people to be fearmongers. You don't want to encourage people to be paranoid. You don't want to encourage people to doubt everything. That's understandable. That's valid. But the minute that you take your eye off of government, you're in trouble. You've got to constantly be vigilant about that sort of thing.
And I understand that. The public has to start taking control, but if you look at it, with voting at an all-time low in a lot of elections now, that people are just turning away from the polls because they think their vote is a wasted vote. They no longer need to cast that ballot because whether it's Republican, Democrat down there, or conservative, liberal, or Democrat up here, okay, people aren't voting because they feel that no matter who gets in, it's the same crap every time, just different faces. And when you add it up to what the government could be covering up, in a sense of false flags, in a sense of setting up corruption, okay, it's very hard to accept that people don't care anymore, which they should, because they're the ones who could make that difference. Or is that pipe dream, in your opinion, dead because of all the games government and things like Wall Street and bankers have played?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? I guess where I'm at is that for too long, people have been apathetic. Okay, especially in our culture. For the longest time, we were led to believe that everything that the major talking heads on all the news networks for decades that was gospel. You know, if Dan Rather came on the news and told us that the sky was falling, well, the sky's falling. Why would Dan lie to us? You know, we would have to believe him. But as we find out as time goes on, things change. You know, first of all, if that was ever true, it's probably not so true anymore. We have reason to be skeptical about things. And I think that apathy breeds apathy. So, you know, once you start to believe that your vote doesn't count, then you find out that politicians are lying to you, and then you find out that the news is lying to you. People do get discouraged. And they get discouraged with the entire system. But instead of being active and trying to change that, okay, what happens is that instead of that, there's an interesting dynamic where people just become entirely apathetic, and they say, you know what, I'm just not going to vote. You know what, I'm not going to watch any TV. You know what, I'm not going to listen to that. And that kind of goes to the point that I was saying earlier. I kind of took offense to the thing about the BS, because you kind of do have to engage. And that means you have to say to yourself, I'm either going to be involved or I'm not going to be involved. And you're either going to let your apathy and the system roll over you, which I can tell you right now, they are counting on that. They're counting on your apathy. In your country and in my country and around the world, governments count on people's apathy. They count on you believing what the emperor says. You know, that's what they count on. They don't want you to question them, because if they do want to get away with anything and you start questioning, that's going to mess their game up. You know, so they count on that. So that's why I stress that it's important to engage. It's important to seek out information, mainstream, alternative, talk to people, engage people, and always keep an open mind about those kind of things. Because if you don't, you're right, we're going to lose it. We're going to completely, if we don't turn this thing around, we're going to completely lose any sense of freedom. We're going to lose any sense of free speech, freedom of information, sharing of information. Think about this, Dave, for a moment. You, my business, and your organization, SOR, and other independent news agencies, and even our ability to even exchange information on social media. Think about how our lives would be affected if tomorrow the entire internet was regulated. You can't say this. You can't say this thing. You can't say that. You can't post this. And I can tell you, on some social media forums, they're already starting to do that sort of thing. They're already demonizing certain alternative media outlets because mainstream doesn't agree with them. That's not freedom. That is a form of slavery. You know, anytime you stifle someone's ability to share information, because all slavery doesn't come in the form of chains or bars. We have to be free to speak our mind. Even if we're the only ones in the room that agree with ourselves, we need to be able to voice our opinion. You know, one of the things that we value in the United States is our right to free speech. And people are always saying, well, you have the right to say whatever you want, but there's consequences for it. Why? What do you mean consequences?
Hold on a second here. I think I may be getting offended, Jamie. I may be getting offended. No, I'm teasing.
You may be. Well, no, but people do. People do get offended, and that's one of the things that I think bothers me. It's the irony of people who attack free speech. They're like, well, you know, you can't just say anything. What if you say something hateful? Well, what if I do? If I say something hateful, guess what? then you can say that guy is a hateful guy. Okay? But what if I don't like what you say? And then we both don't like what the other guy says. And we start telling each other, well, you can't say this, and you can't use that word, and you can't use this word. That's where we run into problems. It's better to allow people to say and think and believe what they want. If you want to believe in aliens, you shouldn't be discriminated against for that. If people want to say, I think Dave's out of his mind, I've never seen an alien. Well, that's their right to say that. And then if other people support you and say, well, I think Dave's on point, I've had similar experiences. You see what I mean? Now you've got a community. But that's one of the values that that's one of the things we value, one of the rights we value in the United States. And one of the points about free speech is this. Free speech is not designed to protect popular speech. In other words, speech that everybody agrees with. Popular speech doesn't need protecting. It's unpopular speech that needs protecting. It's that one voice that can make a difference. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but it needs to be heard. It needs to be allowed to be heard if anybody wants to listen. And those are the values that we need to protect. It's like people always say, well, the United States is a democracy. Well, no, we're not. A lot of people, if you were to walk around with a microphone and ask people on the street, what kind of government do you think the United States has? Most of them would probably answer, we have a democracy. They would be wrong. We do not have a democracy, and I'm glad we don't. What we have is a republic. And a republic is designed and set up to where every voice counts. The idea of a republic is what led to our electoral college system. Because if it was just a democracy, I mean, think about it. A democracy is what? Two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for lunch. You know what I mean? The sheep is the odd man out. It's not going to have a voice. So a democracy isn't always the best thing. So we hold those values important in the United States. And those are the things that are principle-based that we need to protect. And we don't feel every day, or we may not recognize every day how those things are threatened because they're very sneaky about it. We don't necessarily see all the time how some of those principles and values and rights or freedoms may be jeopardized. It's not until it's too late sometimes that we go, oh, wait, hold on. This doesn't feel right, because they sneak it up on you. So people like myself, we keep an eye on those kind of things, and those are the values that I like to hold true. And that's one of the things that, you and I talk about a lot, about the internet and all the bogus information that's out there and the BS and those kind of things. And again, repeating something I said earlier, I would rather take the gamble and wade through the BS. I would rather have more information at hand and use my own intelligence, common sense, and everything to wade through it than say, well, we're regulating everything, and now you're only going to get information from these sources. I don't like that at all. That's something I don't like.
And it's the same up here. It really is the same up here in regards to, you want to have that free voice. You want to have that say in what is going on. You want to be able to feel that you live in a community where your voice can be heard, whether it's positive or negative. And, I mean, that opens up a whole can of worms to how politically correct society has become. I mean, look, we can't even agree on male versus female anymore. I mean, it's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous when you go down that road. But who's to blame for that? Is it the government who is spinning the people against the people, in your opinion?
Well, we haven't gotten too deep into this. We've been around the fringes of it. But my own personal position is that I'm worried about globalism. I don't like it. Again, being from the United States, being a republic, being sovereign, liking the idea of sovereignty, nations. I like the idea of each nation being sovereign. I like the idea of states having their own rights. I like the idea of cities having their own rights. I like the idea of neighborhoods being able to make decisions for themselves. And ultimately, I like the idea of an individual being able to make a decision for himself. So here's the irony of some things. I believe that there is a huge effort towards globalism. Some people want to use the term New World Order. Some people will say globalism, one world government, whatever you want to call it. People want to homogenize everything. And I think socially we could probably appreciate those things. Culturally we could do that. But when it comes to laws, when it comes to jurisdictions, when it comes to the sovereignty of the individual or his community or his state or his country, I don't think that we need to be that homogenized. Once you do that, once we go global, that's a bad thing. Then we're all under one umbrella. And then you talk about just getting our information and everything else from one source. That's a very small cage for everybody to be in, and I don't like it. I don't like it. It completely goes against everything that I stand for. So, personally, I like to avoid anything that even smells like globalism or government domination or anything else. I like the idea of individuals protecting their own right to freedom, their freedom of information. And you talked about the politically correct thing. This idea of what's politically correct and not is kind of a snake that ate its own tail. Once you start telling someone else what they can say, then they're going to start telling you what you can say. And then it's going to go round and round. And before you know it, guess what? None of us can say anything. That's going to be racist, or that's going to be received this way or that way or the other way. And it's one of those progressive little sneaky tactics that the progressive agenda snuck into our culture. Political correctness. Do I applaud people being hateful or mean to each other? No, I don't. But I've used this analogy before. If I live down the street from some old man named Mr. Snooty, and let's say Mr. Snooty hates, everyone that's not the same race as him. He hates young people. He hates our music. He hates us generally. Okay, so we know who Mr. Snooty is. But, so we're not going to, when we trick or treat, we're not going to Mr. Snooty's house. We're not going to invite him over for the party. You know what I mean? He's kind of done that to himself. But who are we to tell Mr. Snooty what he can believe, what he can think, what his bias should be? You know what I mean? As long as he's not hurting us or preventing us from living our life a particular way, let him believe what he wants. I think political correctness has crossed a lot of lines in the sense that it tells other people what you should think, what you should say, what you should believe. And that's not right. You cannot do that. If you don't agree with somebody else, fine, don't agree with them. As long as they're not hurting you or infringing upon you or keeping you from getting a job or keeping you from getting an education or preventing you from entering an establishment or whatever, who cares what somebody else thinks? And that's one of the ironies about the liberal community and the progressive community is that they're really not very liberal. If you don't believe what they believe, they don't support your liberties at all. And they're not really progressive. How forward is that to demonize anybody that doesn't believe what you believe? It's funny that I see a lot of progressives out at rallies and marches and political campaigns and things like that using the word fascist. They throw it around. You're a fascist. You're a fascist. It's like, what? They're the most fascist group of people that I've ever seen. So, you know, we're talking about information. We're talking about the sharing of information. We're talking about biases. We're talking about what's politically correct. And again, man, at the end of the day, where I come from, I think the more we are allowed to share and the more openly we're allowed to share, the better. I mean, just look at our American politics right now is vicious. I've never seen social media blow up so much. And there's a lot of negative in that. But it's also a good thing, because the good part about it is that people are engaged. They're engaged. They're taking an interest. And if there was no internet, none of this would be happening right now. People would just be going on about their business, believing whatever the news told them, and they would just be, you know, blind and not even a part of the process. So I'm encouraged that a lot more people are involved, a lot more people are sharing information, a lot more people are debating. You know, like I said, there's a lot of negative in it, but that's humanity. No, not everything about human dynamics is a pretty thing. But I would rather be engaged and informed than ignorant and, you know, blissfully ignorant. I don't like that position.
I got to tell you a story. You know, I couldn't believe it when my daughter, who graduates high school this year, and I'm so excited in 2 weeks to actually go down and see her in her beautiful prom dress looking like the princess that she deserves to look like. I remember going back to kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, when she was at this elementary school. There was not a single male teacher there. And the average age of the teachers there was probably in their 50s. And remember sports day when we actually used to give winning badges out? Well, now it's all participant badges.
Yeah.
The competition didn't matter because we didn't want to hurt any children's feelings. And I looked at that, and that's still, I mean, looking back, that's almost 12 years ago now. That still affects me seeing that, because I remember disagreeing with that so much that we're not allowed to win and lose anymore. We're not allowed.
Right.
You know, every child must feel the same. You know, sports day is not like kids who go hungry. You know, which I'm a firm believer that if there's children out there who are going hungry at lunchtime or recess time, get them some bloody food. They're humans.
Sure.
You know, but when it comes to real life, okay, life is winning and losing. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes the game is washed out.
Right.
You know, and go ahead.
When you, well, I didn't mean to cut you off, but when you level the playing field like that, you don't raise the bar, you lower the bar. Yeah, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So if you encourage weakness, you're encouraging everybody to be weak. And that doesn't help anybody at the end of the day. It doesn't help anyone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We got about 3.5 minutes here before we got to go to break. Eric is asking a question. Do you think, Jamie, that the shooter that hated Republicans and shot up the ball game was a plant to stir the pot?
No, I don't. I don't have any sort of inclination or information that would lead me to believe that. I think that is, who was it? House Majority with Steve Scalise. He was shot, and I think 4 others were shot. Is that right in Virginia?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. That's very unfortunate. No, I don't think that was a plant. I think that. If anything, one of the discouraging things about that story is that, and I was busy with the site when it first broke, So I kind of turned on some news to while I was working to kind of get a little bit of it. And what was discouraging is within the first hour of that story, some politician was on the news talking about gun control, and it made me want to throw up. It's like, really, you want to come out with an agenda right now? How about we talk about the person that shot, the people that are shot? And one of the other discouraging things was Wolf Blitzer was delivering the story on CNN, and when he was delivering the story, they I guess they cut to someone that knew him in the community, knew the shooter, and so they were interviewing that guy. And Wolf Blitzer was the desk host, but they had a Fylth reporter out with a microphone in the face of this person that knew him, right? And they're like, so he goes, well, he's not a bad guy. He was just fed up with politics. He's not an evil person. He was just fed up with politics. And then they cut back to Wolf Blitzer, and Wolf Blitzer didn't correct that. And that to me, that was very discouraging. That was like heavy political bias playing into Blitzer's reaction to that. I don't know, if I was sitting at that desk and the field reporter brought that message to me, I would have said, well, I'm sure he is. A lot of us are fed up with politics, but it's still an evil thing to take a gun to a softball game and mow people down. I don't care what brand your politics are. That's an evil thing to do, but, because it was the GOP and because it was CNN, you said, oh, well, it wasn't an evil thing to do. Yes, it was.
And on that note, Jamie, good timing. We're going to shut you down for hour number 2. Put that one in the books. We got hour number 3 with Jamie Sexton from Rebel Planet News coming right up after this on the mighty Spaced Out Radio. Jamie comes on this program the third Thursday of every month. His next appearance will be on Thursday, July 20th. Who knows what we'll get into at that point, but something we'll get into. That's just the way we go. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I'm your host, Dave Scott. Keep an eye out for Carl and the unicorns coming around during the break. We'll be right back. Looking for a great weekend getaway this fall? Hi there, this is Dave Scott. Come on up to the heart of British Columbia for the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon, being held at the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Speakers from all over North America are coming to discuss Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and intuitiveness for the 3-day event, September 29th to October 1st. For more information, go to spacedoutradio.com and click on the Caribou Paracon banner and book your tickets today. Come to BC, where the paranormal is waiting for you.
The SOR Sightlines is a place for you to find answers to your strange experiences. Hi there, this is Mike Schmidt. If you have had an encounter with ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, ETs, or anything else that doesn't make sense, head to spacedoutradio.com and file a Sightlines report. All information you give is 100% confidential, and I will personally help you find the answers you need. SOR Sightlines, your answers are a click away.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4COP. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is your medium, Joanna, from Spaced Out Weekend, 2 Mediums and a Large.
I would love it if you would come and join us with host James Tyson every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. Together, we will take your calls and your questions live. Our goal is to provide you with a positive outlook on deep questions that you may have. Questions regarding love, relationships, money, or whatever else is on your mind. Come and check us out at spacedoutradio.com.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
A child grew up too fast, went running wild. Now we don't know who to pray to anymore.
Welcome back to the final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you along for the ride. Tomorrow night, we round out the week with author Robert Collins. We're getting into all things ufological, paranormal. It's going to be a great trip indeed. We start at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Great to have you with us. We love being the nighttime entertainment for those staying up late in Noonan, Georgia on WQEE 99 Rock the Key. We're also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Itch Theology. Itch Theology is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can hang out on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to kick it with the guys like Canadian Joe, Skeptic, Jeff, and the rest of the crowd. That would be kind of cool. You can follow me on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download this show and others on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month, read up on the Encounter Online, our news section, or head over to the Spaced Out Radio store. Be like Bill Cardwell, because he has a shirt, a hat, a poster, a sticker. He's got all the swag. That's just the way he does things around here. Number one is what we call him. And you can also get your VIP passes for the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon happening September 29th to October 1st right here in beautiful British Columbia and 108 Mile Ranch, BC at the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort. Tickets are 10% off. VIP tickets, I should say, are 10% off until July 31st, so I hope you scoop them on up. The third Thursday of every month means it's Rebel Planet News time with Jamie Sexton out of Las Vegas, Nevada. He's our resident conspiracy expert. Jamie, welcome back.
Hey.
We talked a lot about governmental affairs in hour number 2. I want to switch gears here to another governmental topic because we see events like Pizzagate, like Jade Helm, and other events that are supposed to suppress the people of the country. Do you think that the government is actually preparing a takeover of a communist type or a fascist type stance against its own people?
Well, I don't know necessarily that they're preparing for something inevitable like that. I know that over the past decade or two, there's been more training, private training, and secret training for such an event. Now, whether that event be planned or if the training's more for as a what if is a little unclear. But the secrecy around that, especially in our country, is a little alarming. And when you mentioned Jade Helm, I remember that being a big trigger for a lot of people because, we have provisions in our Constitution that are supposed to prevent even the possibility of some of the implications of what Jade Helm might have been. Military is not permitted to police civilian territory in the United States. Only under extreme conditions of martial law is that the case. So even training for such a thing by military forces, especially without telling the public really what you're doing, is a little alarming, and it is it's cause for people to speculate. And so So I remember when that came about, there were all these wild conspiracy theories about what it meant, what it was going to lead to. And for some, there was this feeling of inevitability, like something was definitely going on. At the end of the day, it was more training than anything. There wasn't a takeover of the people or anything like that. But I think that that's one of those things that, again, has happened in history. You know, we've seen that happen in history. And so I think the possibility of such a thing is there, and I think that we should explore that. You know, I think people really went too far in a lot of their speculation with it. On the other hand, there were a lot of quirky things about it that still haven't been answered with Jade Helm, even from the official documents about Jade Helm. There's some aspects about it that really haven't been explained yet, like here in Las Vegas, for example, the build-up to Jade Helm. I guess probably 6 to 8 months before that, there were 3 different, I'd call them military vehicle depots, is the way I would describe them. There were areas of Las Vegas where a very large amount of Humvees and Jeeps and other military vehicles were just stationed. And we're talking hundreds at each location. And this wasn't a military base. It wasn't National Guard base. It wasn't anything like that. It was just, one of them, in fact, was an old Nissan car dealership that was no longer in business. And they piled up, hundreds of these vehicles there. And then they went and got those big, those big highway dividers, those concrete dividers, and stacked those up around this entire facility. And it was just a really odd thing, a lot of things like that. There was a lot of footage online of trains carrying hundreds and hundreds of military vehicles at different spots in the nation. So there was a lot of weird and odd things that were going on around Jade Helm. But the official narrative for what Jade Helm was supposed to be was a military exercise. But it never really was fully explained. And like I said earlier, I guess the implication of military troops on civilian soil was a little bit alarming to people. But it didn't develop it to anything at the time. So, I don't know. Pizzagate to me is a non-starter. I never really understood the angle of that story anyway. I know that politician Anthony Weiner was recently convicted of some inappropriate things, and his name was mixed up in that. But I don't see that. I'm not sure how that would be a government conspiracy. What were you getting at with that?
Well, with Pizzagate, I mean, there's the whole child prostitution ring that people just will not let go of. They picked this pizza joint in Washington, D.C., said there was a basement with tunnels underneath the building that led to young men and women, even children, being put on the black market for sexual innuendo. Really disgusting, right, to be honest. They said John Podesta was involved, the Clintons were involved, etc. And yet they go into the building and lo and behold, there's no basement.
Right.
Yeah. But that's the idea of this thinking of people in the conspiracy theory side, that they're all looking for some sort of angle. And the problem that I see from this side of the microphone is too many times we have people jumping on bandwagons rather than doing real research. They're not going to the scene. They're not going to talk to people. They're looking at photographs. Oh, this person said this and this person said that. They're not qualifying their information, and innocent people are getting hurt. And in the meantime, what it is doing, in my opinion, is it's a very shallow form of fear-mongering that's scaring a hell of a lot of people. A hell of a lot of people.
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't think I'd call any politician innocent people, especially Hillary Clinton or John Podesta. But that story, like I said, was a non-starter for me. I really didn't look too deeply in it, but same conclusion as you, that it just sort of nothing really became of it. I did hear the part about looking for a basement. There was no basement, and nothing could be corroborated. So, I don't know what to say about that. To me, that seemed like a politically motivated thing, misinformation. I don't even know if that's a conspiracy theorist thing. I don't even know where that story originated, to be honest with you. Maybe you do, but I don't. And I don't know. I just think that that's one of those unfortunate stories that sort of just, it seemed to me like a rumor or hearsay, and it just blew up.
Getting back to the whole Jade Helm conspiracy, there was a lot of people out there saying that they were transforming Walmarts into FEMA camps and they were going to start arresting people, and up to 2 million people were going to be arrested and thrown into the dungeons of Walmart. I have a tough time understanding this. I really do. I really have a tough time understanding this. Maybe I'm a little naive when it comes to certain things, okay? But, come on. Where's the proof? Where is the proof?
Well, I agree with you on that. The Walmart aspect, there is a little bit of truth to them being involved in the Jade Helm exercises. Because I did some exploring into that myself, and we found out that Walmart was undergoing a nationwide upgrade or remodeling project with a lot of their different Walmarts. Some of them were being converted from regular Walmarts into their super Walmarts, and then a lot of the regular Walmarts were just getting a facelift. And then some of them were actually going out of business. They were shutting them down, but they still own the property. And apparently they did make a contract with the government at some of the places that these exercises were going down to use their facilities for storage of equipment and things like that. But you and I have talked about this a little bit before, and I'd heard stories like you did about underground tunnels and all these sorts of things that were never verified. It just seemed to be a bunch of rumors and conspiracy theories. But there was some truth to the Walmart aspect of it. As far as the government taking over everybody at the time, there was a lot. As I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of smoke there. How much fire there was, I really don't know. It turned out to be an exercise more than anything. But, we don't, in the U.S., we don't make a habit of military aircraft just flying over civilian territory on a regular basis. That doesn't happen here. Plenty of military here and plenty of military exercises, but it's usually restricted to the areas and the zones where they're supposed to be conducting their exercises. Storing equipment at Walmarts and driving Humvees down the street and conducting exercises that resembled martial law is alarming. It is something that people should pay attention to. I personally cannot dismiss the the creepiness of it. And it hasn't, to this date, hasn't really been fully explained what it was for. You know, it obviously was a training exercise for a military activity in a civilian or urban area. I heard some explanations that weren't quite official, but they were from officials who implied that Jade Helm was an exercise for conducting urban raids overseas in war-torn areas. And I didn't quite buy that explanation because there's nowhere that we're at war in the world right now, or have been, that has urban areas that resemble ours. So that was a little odd. So there are some unanswered questions, and from where I sit, it's creepy. It is creepy, and I'm not going to sweep it under the rug. I think there's a creepy element to Jade Helm. It still has, there's still some odd stuff to it. On the other hand, yeah, the conspiracy theorists ran wild with it. They filled in their own blanks, and they came to conclusions that something was absolutely impending soon. And it caused a lot of concern. It caused a lot of uproar and things like that. But again, that's the day and age that we live in, man. When information is exchanged that quickly, that's going to happen. You're going to have that. And there's really, to be honest with you, there's not much you can do about that. You know, it's just the nature of the beast with something like the internet and things like that. So in the wash, you know, I'd look at something like Jade Helm, and I might say, I guess if I'm doing all the math up on the whole thing, where do I come out with that? I think that, okay, so the government was up to something. Who knows what it was? Looks like an exercise, and a lot of conspiracy theorists ran wild with it. Okay, easy enough. Should we worry about that in the future? Not really, not as far as I'm concerned. I think anytime there's something going on in the world that people are curious about, it's going to be hacked up from one side down the other, and everybody's going to hit it from different angles. I don't think you're ever going to stop conspiracy theories, and hopefully we never stop the flow of information. You know, maybe in time, because the internet's still relatively young, but maybe in time we'll find some balance. I don't want that kind of balance to come in the form of regulation. I think that's a slippery slope, to be honest.
So in the end, and I'll ask you this again, because I asked you early in hour number 2, what do people believe? What can they believe? Because if the conspiracy theorists are running roughshod with absolutely everything being a false flag, everything being a government setup, from some whack job going into a school and shooting up kids to what we saw just the other day in Washington, D.C. All you have to do, Jamie, is go look on the alternative side of Facebook, and within minutes of these actions happening, false flag, this is a government setup, you can tell nobody died there, nobody is shot, it's all an act, it's all pre-recorded, you can hear everything. And what I see happening with this is we are building a society, since 9/11, we are building a society of paranoia. And that isn't healthy either. So what do people believe?
Well, so on the one hand, you have a threat of, or you run the risk of building a society of paranoia versus limiting information. Because really, at the end of the day, we're really talking about the internet is really what we're talking about. If there was no internet, we wouldn't even be talking about these things. So, like I said, I think in time, maybe this beast that is the internet will sort of find its own balance in that. And in the meanwhile, I think we just have to accept it for what it is. I think we have to allow it that. You know, I mean, we could encourage people to be more accurate with their information, to not be so alarmist, or, you know, we could do that. But at the same time, I would never encourage people not to explore alternative theories. To me, if I had to pick one, and I've kind of said this in different ways throughout the night, but if I had to pick one, I would have to lean on the side of more information. I always would have to do that, because where I come from, the more information you have available, the better off you are. Information is power. And sure, wrong information is a bad thing. For sure it is. But at the same time, what's wrong at the end of the day with questioning things? What's wrong with questioning something? Nothing. So if I read something that sounds outlandish to me on the internet, and I'm like, oh my God, that sounds crazy. That sounds, what? There's a basement below a pizza parlor and they're touching little kids inappropriately? That's crazy. Well, I have two choices at that point. I could say, well, that's crazy. I'm not going to pay any attention to that at all. That's just ridiculous. Has anybody verified this? No, well, screw that. I'm not listening to that. Or I could believe the whole thing, hook, line, and sinker, right? But that's my choice to do. Now, what if it turned out, no matter how outlandish a story may sound, right? What if it turned out that there was some validity to that story? What if it turned out in time that story was true, or some other story? If we shut down information because it seems too far out there, or because conspiracy theorists run wild or whatever else, then we're getting into the business again of controlling information. I know it's a displeasure, especially to you, because you talk about it a lot, and a lot of people. It's a displeasure to people, the amount of misinformation and wrong information. I understand that. But that's just the nature of that's human nature. That's the nature of the internet. And you're probably always going to have that now that the internet is around. And I would rather accept that as part of the bargain than have things regulated and shut down and encourage people not to explore the alternative, to have people not open the dialogue or to question official narratives and things like that. I think that in principle is the more important principle, to have the right to do that. And then as individuals, I think we have a responsibility in this new age with this abundance of free flow of information. We have a responsibility as listeners and viewers and receivers of the information to be more educated. You know, if I hear something outlandish, or I read something outlandish or crazy on the internet, I'm not just going to get it from one source. If it piques my interest, I'm probably going to spend at least the first hour after I've heard about it Googling everything I can on it. And if it still piques my interest, I'm going to continue to seek information on it. I think where people go wrong, this may be one of the things that speaks more to your concerns. I think where people go wrong is they let their biases get involved. So if they have a political bias or a particular conspiratorial bias, maybe they, and this has been proven, people tend to seek out information that validates their position. So if someone has a particular political bias, they're probably going to start tuning into the news channel that serves up their flavor of political bias. They're probably going to start looking up websites and visiting websites on a regular basis that appeal to their particular political bias. And we're using politics in that example. But I think it holds true for any type of interest, any category of interest. People do tend to seek out information that validates whatever position they adopt. And I think maybe that's one of the things that we can be more objective about, if you really want to be objective. But that has to be done on the individual level. I don't think that anybody needs to regulate that or, impose how people should receive or evaluate information. I think we have to be more responsible as individuals to do that. In other words, if you're reading some article about global warming or this or that or whatever your position may be, maybe spend a few minutes or a few hours examining the other side, instead of letting your ego or your emotion take over. If you really want to remain objective and you really want to remain informed and arrive at a balanced position, then you have to do that. You have to sort of look at all angles. But that's one of the things, that's one of the good things. That's one of the plus column elements to the internet, is that there is more information. So there's more for you to choose from. So if you feel like something's outlandish, sure, it may aggravate you a little bit, but so just don't, if the conspiracy theories bug you, don't read them. You know what I mean? If you don't believe them, don't read them.
No, and I understand that, Jamie, but this leads to a question out of the Revolution Radio room by Sungazer, who says, Jamie, do you believe then that much of the media and what they're reporting is staged? Because I know when I went to broadcasting school 21 years ago when I started, day number one, it was you're becoming a journalist, you are unbiased. You don't take a free meal, you don't take a baseball game ticket, you don't take a goodie bag, nothing for free. That's the way we were trained. Yet, when I look at the American media, it is very hard for me to understand and comprehend how anybody could be biased one way or another politically when that's not the job of journalism. So Sungazer's question actually has a lot of validity.
I guess, on the other hand, let's not be naive. Every single human being on this planet has a bias. We all do. It's human nature. And it's not a bad thing that we do. If you think about it, an opinion is a bias. Whatever your opinion is probably going to tilt one way or the other, right? So any given topic on this planet, is going to lead to a margin. How do you like that ice cream? This guy's going to say, I don't know, I don't really like it. And the other guy, well, I really do like it. Well, that's you're taking a position. You know what I mean? And so that happens with every fabric of humanity. You will lean one way or another, and that in itself is a bias. So even as a reporter, yes, you want to try to remain objective. Yes, you want to try to keep your bias low. Those are principles of journalism, as you explained. Those are, in my opinion, should be principles of life. Try to remain objective and open-minded about things. Try to always check and recalibrate your bias as you go through life, just to make sure that you're not married to a position that you're no longer familiar with as time goes on. But at the same time, again, we would all be completely naive to think that every single journalist who's ever picked up a pen, typed on a keyboard, or held a camera or a microphone, we would be completely naive to assume that they have zero bias, because that's just absolutely non-human. We all have a bias. So, in saying that, the question I believe your listener was asking was about staged news, and I do believe, without naming any names, I do believe that there are a few networks, major mainstream news networks out there right now that are absolutely deliberately staging stories and curving the news. I believe that absolutely 100%, no question. I've talked to some of the people who are journalists in those corporations who will openly admit that they are told to color a story one way or another. And I've seen other evidence of stories that are just completely staged and made up. That's really unfortunate. I don't know if that's unique to the United States or not. I can't speak to that because I don't live in other parts of the world, and it's hard for me to verify that sort of thing. But does it happen here? Absolutely. Unfortunately, it does happen here. And that, to me, is really dishonest, especially from a major news network that millions of people get their information from. To me, that's a huge tragedy. And to be honest with you, if I'm going to compare one demon against the other, if I'm going to say, well, the internet is full of conspiracy theorists, the internet is full of misinformation, the internet is full of people who get it wrong, okay, I can understand that because most of these people are just sitting at their desk, they're not journalists, and they're doing the best they can, some of them, genuinely trying to get information or contribute to the process of getting to the truth. So I can expect that some of those people are in a position to get it wrong. And I can accept that. I can look at that and understand that. And I can give them that handicap. Okay. I cannot give a major news network a handicap for purposely misleading, purposely staging a story. If I had to pick which one was worse, I would say the major networks, when they knowingly do some of the things they do, that is far, far more troublesome to me than the internet rampant with misinformation and conspiracy theorists. You know, that if I had to, if on balance, I would be much more worried about the major networks.
So this leads to a question from Tripp in one of our chat rooms. Do you think then, Jamie, it's time to reinstate the fairness doctrine and get American news out of the entertainment business?
I don't really know. I don't know. I never was a real big fan of the fairness doctrine because of some of the other things that were included in it. But I think just the public themselves calling these networks out on their stuff, on their BS. I think that people have more power than they give themselves credit for, and they've been led to believe that they don't have power and they don't have influence, but they do actually. And I think that some of these networks are suffering right now. They're, like I said earlier, they're losing some of their corporate sponsorship. I think it was last week that one CNN reporter was let go because of some statement that he made on air. And I think these people are not above reproach. They're not above being taken to task. And if we're going to take on the alternative media, fair enough. But I think before we get to taking on amateur and startup and armchair reporters, before we take on the task of trying to correct those people, I think it's more important that we hold the torch to the mainstream networks, because there's a perception that what they're telling you is true. And, if 80% of the people in a room believe what they're told because it's supposedly coming from a reputable source, but they're not listening. They're not listening. That same 80% is not listening to this little guy over here with a tape recorder and filming things on his phone because, well, who are you? You're not a real reporter. You went out and got that story on your cell phone. That sounds good in theory, but we're finding out more often than not that guy is actually his intentions are actually closer to those journalistic values and principles and ethics that you cited earlier, rather than the major news networks. We're finding more and more that these alternative-minded people are actually closer to real journalism, at least in principles and ethics, than the mainstream. And I would hold them to a higher standard anyway, because they have the audience. So maybe it's evident by the things I'm saying, but I definitely have a problem, lately with major news networks, and definitely.
But has the damage been done, in your opinion, when you look at the alternative and the fear mongering that is coming out of that? You look at the way people are acting. You see people stockpiling weapons as much as possible, stockpiling food, getting their underground bunkers ready, and whatever else for the doomsday that is coming. Do you feel that possibly, maybe government infiltrated, that the media has caused or played a big role in this paranoia system that we have? Because let's face it, 9/11 changed a lot of actions inside the United States.
Well, I guess. I mean, yeah, the media definitely plays a part in a lot of our society. A lot of our society. It does it in subtle ways, and then it does it in a lot of overt ways. But yeah, the media definitely plays a part in a lot of things. And 9/11 changed a lot of things in this country, as far as I'm concerned, for the negative. I don't see one good thing that came out of 9/11. No policies. Nothing good has come out of it. What I see out of 9/11, are a bunch of new laws and infringement on personal liberties. I don't think, it makes travel much more difficult. It's very stifling. And as far as I know, we haven't caught one single terrorist because of the TSA, because of any of Homeland Security or any of these new agencies. As far as I know, to date, we have not caught one single terrorist before they did anything. We've caught a lot of so-called terrorists after they've blown something up or after they've gotten caught, but we haven't prevented anything after 9/11, to my knowledge. There hasn't been one story that's come across my radar that we've prevented anything because of new laws, policies, agencies, or anything else. All I know is that, it feels like there's been a whole lot of new infringements on our privacy. It's more difficult to travel. There's been new taxes instituted because of it, all kinds of things. So out of that tragedy, I don't see where we benefited ourselves in the cleanup at all.
Trust me, as someone who has to cross the border with a passport now, it drives me absolutely crazy. I grew up on a border town where we would literally run across the border to get cheap gas or go for a meal at the burger joint there. And 9/11 literally wiped out that town because the Canadians stopped going down. It was too much harassment at the border. And we're like, really? All because one female Republican at the time stated, the terrorists came into the United States through Canada, therefore it's Canada's fault that they got into the U.S. Well, the last time I checked, if I want to cross the border, I have to go through an American guard who's sitting at the crossing.
Right.
So who let them in, Canada or the U.S.? But that's that paranoia that starts from the top, Jamie.
Well, that's exactly. But here's the problem is that I think that it kind of speaks a little bit to what I was talking about before, is that we kind of, humans kind of, it's so odd to me that human beings expect perfection out of everyone else except themselves. And we will never, ever, ever achieve that. In life, we must take some risk. Sometimes we're going to hurt each other's feelings. Sometimes, as you mentioned earlier, some people are going to lose and not everybody's going to get a trophy. You know, Mr. Snooty at the end of the block. You think we're ever going to get rid of all of those guys? That's not going to happen. We need to stop living in a fairy tale world where we try to prevent everything and we try to perfect everything. And the way when we start using things like laws, new law for this, a new law for that, a new regulation for this, a new regulation for that, terms like political correctness, you can't say this, you can't say that. What happens is that we start putting ourselves in smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller little boxes. You know what I mean? With all of these regulations and what's correct and what's not correct. There's a way to work towards those well-intended ideas, but imposing and regulating that sort of thing is not the way to get there. At the end of the day, you'll end up caging yourself in too small a cage, and that's not where we want to be. You know, if we all want to be free, we have to allow the other people to be free. That's what we have to do. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with drawing boundaries for yourself. You know, that's okay. For example, as far as I'm concerned, if a person has a particular bias in their life, I want to live my life this way. I want to vote for this guy. I want to watch this news station. More power to you, man. That's your freedom of choice. Do that. Believe what you want to believe. Celebrate what you want to celebrate. Wear what you want to wear. Call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. That's fine. But if you want people to accept you and your right to do that, then you need to be equally willing to accept their right to do what they do, as long as neither of you are infringing or harming the other. And I think what we've got in the world nowadays, and it's escalating socially and culturally and all over the internet, politically, all kinds of different ways, we have people drawing lines saying where they stand, but they aren't willing to be accepting of the other people. They aren't willing to accept the other side, the other argument, the other lifestyle. And that, to me, is the furthest thing from freedom, the furthest thing from being open-minded or liberal or anything. And when we start regulating things to the point where nobody can say anything, then we're going to be in real trouble. And we start regulating to the point where nobody can question anything or nobody can challenge anything, you know, then we're in trouble. So we got to keep all these things in mind and strike a balance. There's a whole lot of rhetoric going around nowadays, especially politically. I'm sure you've been following it. It's an ugly thing right now, and I hope it calms down soon. But meanwhile, it's good discourse. You know, it's ugly, but in a way, it's healthy that everybody's involved in the process.
Do you think Homeland Security will ever loosen its grasps?
No, I don't. The problem with bureaucracy and agencies, especially government agencies, is they never go away. They only become more imposing, tax more. They become more of a burden than any good they do, and that's almost with any government institution. I don't see it going away at all. Unfortunately, I don't see what good they do. I really don't, but it's here, and I'm sure it's here to stay.
How do you, as an American, feel about that? Because I know up here, it's a little bit more lax, okay? I'm not saying that Canada is a bed of roses. I mean, we do have a lot of problems up here, but we don't look at tightening down on the people. We don't look at tightening down on the immigration. We don't look at tightening down on the borders. We don't look at tightening down on our trade relations. Yet, millions of Canadians, much like millions of Americans, like to come north for a holiday. Millions of Canadians like to go south. And the beautiful part about being in North America is we should have that ability to do that. So as an American, do you almost feel suffocated by all these rules and regulations that have come up since 9/11?
Absolutely, I do. But it's a mixed bag. I don't think that's an easy question to answer. I mean, there is some validity to the idea of protecting your sovereignty, protecting your borders. There's a lot of validity to that. But you can't do it at the expense of freedom. It goes back to what I was saying. Sometimes in life, to be free, you have to take some risk to do that. And so there's a balance there that has to be. What bothers me, I guess, is that some of these laws and regulations that seem like they've come to be in agencies like Homeland Security, some of these agencies that seem like they were created for the purpose of protecting people, actually, in my opinion, move us closer to something resembling a police state or over-regulated and things like you said. That to me, that makes it not a good thing. But they'll sell it to us. They'll sell you an idea based on. Now you talk about fear-mongering, and I like to suggest that the government does its own brand of fear-mongering. They like to fear-monger. The mainstream media likes to fear-mongering. So yes, there's plenty of fear-mongering on the internet, no question about it. But don't think that those other agencies, the government and the military and mainstream media, don't think that they're above fear-mongering. They do their own brand of it. And we were sold, on 9/11, we were sold this thing called the Patriot Act, where, sign away this right, sign away that right, sign away this, and like you said, it's done nothing but make things uncomfortable for us. There hasn't been one case of one event of terrorism being thwarted or prevented because of any post 9/11 regulations or laws or agencies being created. Not one. And anything that has happened, you always hear this. Law enforcement had their eye on them. Really? Well, then how did like these Manchester incident a couple of weeks ago? Officials were watching them. It's like, what were you watching? Because they got away with it. They executed their plan. So I think it's almost comical and sad that we had them on a watch list. Well, why weren't you watching them then? Why did this happen? So I don't know. These agencies always like to justify their positions. These politicians always like to justify new laws and regulations and taxes and putting people in smaller and smaller boxes. But nothing good ever comes of it. Nobody's safer. I mean, trust me, if there was one incident of terrorism being prevented post 9/11 because of any of these things, we would have heard about it. It would have been bragged about on the news. Oh, we caught this group of terrorists. They were planning to do this, but we never hear that. We never hear that. Only after they blow something up, then we hear, oh, they were on a watch list.
We have that here too. We have a prime minister here who heard an apology from somebody who went over to fight for ISIS. The previous government took away his Canadian citizenship so he couldn't enter the country, but our prime minister in his flowers and rainbows decided to say he apologized, so he deserves his citizenship and a second opportunity to be Canadian.
Well, that's generous.
Yeah, that's what we deal with up here. I mean, that's the loose end of the stick of this politically correct garbage that's out there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, citizenship does have to be a privilege and not a right, and that's my opinion on that. But on the flip side, and this leads to a question from BTO. You know, much like Canada, the United States was founded on immigrants. There's a lot of illegal immigrants right now in the United States who are law-abiding citizens, who are following the law, getting an education, very well known in the community. Maybe they're coaching football or baseball or doing whatever. I can tell you right now, I have cousins down living in Las Vegas who are illegal immigrants. They arrived in Las Vegas to work for a company and help run a company down there about a year before 9/11 or
Right.
six months before 9/11. They had applied for their green card. The company was going to get them a green card. 9/11 happens. They shut down all green cards for immigrants. Now they're stuck because they've sold all their property and everything up in Calgary, Alberta, bought a home in Las Vegas.
Right.
Now they can't move. They're stuck.
Right.
They're illegal immigrants.
Well, my argument to that is if I steal your car and I get caught and I say, yeah, I know, I realize I stole the car, I understand, but I really needed to get back and forth to work to feed my family. I had to do that. If I didn't have this stolen car, I could not get back and forth to work and I would lose my job and my family would starve. And so I had to steal the car. Breaking the law, there is absolutely zero excuse for breaking the law. What people fail to realize is that we do have an immigration system in the United States. Yes, we are, in fact, a nation of immigrants, but we have a legal immigration system. So if someone wanted to become a legal citizen, they can do that. I always hear these stories about people who come to the United States illegally and do noble things. And then when their status is challenged, they like to cite the noble things. Well, I haven't broken any laws. I'm a good person. I'm only here to do good things. Yes, you are. And you know what? We would love to have you as a citizen. The problem is that you didn't do it the right way. And if you don't do it the right way, then how can we tell the guy who means to come over here and blow everybody up that he has to do it the right way? So I don't buy illegal immigration, no matter how good the person is or how good their intentions are or how long they've been here or how many friends they have. I don't buy that as an excuse for breaking the law. Either you're going to have laws or you're not, period. So I know there's a whole lot of hard luck stories, and everybody likes to use the catchphrase, the United States was founded by immigrants. Yes, it was. But there aren't any immigrants here anymore because once the nation was founded, it became a nation. You understand what I'm saying?
Agreed, my friend.
So that's the balance for me there. And I know there's a lot of unfortunate circumstance in that, but you know, we can't look at every hard luck story and give everybody a pass for breaking the law, especially when we do have a system. So
I got to wrap it up, Jamie. Time has run out on Rebel Planet News on Spaced Out Radio. Thank you so much for being with us, my friend.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And watch out for them unicorns. Don't want Tiffany to run you over to try and grab one for the backyard there. Hold on one second. Let me wrap this thing up. If you're listening in the background, you hear Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking us out of tonight's show. Bumblefoot is the official sound of Spaced Out Radio. Tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time, author Robert Collins talks UFOs and paranormal at spacedoutradio.com. Want to thank my team, Everett Thiemer, Eric Markham from The Encounter Online, Kim Gandy, Director of Business Development, Jolene Lammers, Web Design, Catherine James, Social Media, Bob Davis, our intro voice, Thomas McGowan, Sales, and Lana Scott, our Paracon Coordinator, for making this happen each and every night. And to all of you listening in on the mighty SOR, I appreciate it. And together, we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, take us home. Have a good one. See you in 21 hours.